and the island's food system. We're a little worried, or I was a little worried, no one would come out this evening to the IIS for yet another public forum on agriculture. As an historian of this island, and I do work here at the university, have been associated with the Institute of Island Studies since, at last count, 1986, enrolled in kindergarten. But as an historian of this island, and someone who grew up on Prince Edward Island, I know how important agriculture has been to all aspects of our life here. It weaves itself into our society and our culture, as well as being still, despite the predictions of the 70s, the #1 industry in the province. And that is saying something for the staying power of agriculture. This evening, with support from the VP Academic and Research, hi Robert Gilmore, with support from Robert Gilmore, the Institute of Island Studies is coming back to this topic because it's a vital topic. Sustainability is a buzzword on everyone's lips. This evening, we want to take a more systemic sort of approach to that theme, sustainability. And we're very pleased and proud to have with us a panel headed by Mark Lapping, but including several islanders who are going to respond to the remarks that we are going to receive from Mark. And I will introduce Mark. He will provide us with an address, and then each of our panelists will in turn have about 10 minutes to respond. You said 8 or 9 minutes, but I'm the MC there, so I decided to up that by 20%.
To be 15?
Yeah. No, but there was inflation. And then we're going to open the dialogue to the audience, because it's very, very important that this be a dialogue. We don't pretend to have all the answers. If we did, we wouldn't have the question of whether or not agriculture is sustainable. And then Aaron Hiley, is rapporteur for this evening. And once we're done with the question and answer, we'll invite Erin up to give us some thoughts about what she's heard this evening and her own insights into it. So, are you okay with that as an agenda? I suppose. Yeah. Mark Lapping is a man that I have desired to meet for many years. And it seemed every time Mark was about to come to Prince Edward Island for an extended stay, something happened. But he has been associated with the Institute of Island Studies for 2 decades now, probably. And he's had a long interest in land issues on Prince Edward Island. He has long been linked with the Muskie School of Public Service at the University of Maine. There are some days this doesn't work. He's been founding dean of the School of Rural Planning and Development at Guelph University. And he is a well-known author and writer and public policy analyst. So, in recent years, Mark has focused his work on systems and has written extensively on the subject. At the Muskie School, he was the leader of what my notes here describe as a really kind of ambitious undertaking to develop a food plan and strategy for the state of Maine. And what's important about that, I think, and Mark will reveal this in a moment, is the emphasis on systems. That our problems don't start and end in the field, but extend through the society, and the solutions are to be found there as well. So Mark, without further ado, I'm going to give you the floor, and then we'll go with each of the panelists in turn.
Thank you, Ed. Really delighted to be with you tonight. It's been very cathartic to get out of the United States for a while. Before I get into tonight's discussion, I want to point something out that doesn't happen very often. This is the first page of the New York Times, which very rarely devotes the first page to anything about agriculture. October 30th, 2016, and the article is Doubts About a Promised Bounty. Genetically modified crops have failed to yield, to lift yields and ease pesticide use. It's a very substantial article, and as you might imagine, it's been attacked by Monsanto and others left and right. But for the Times to devote an entire first page, literally, and then other pages, to doubts about genetically modified food, I think really indicates a real shift, not only in the science and evaluation of science, but in the concerns of the American people in terms of their food. Rather than do a PowerPoint, because I'd like to leave something with you, I'm going to ask if each of you take a copy of, and I'm going to need one too. Let me provide a little background. Each of the states in New England have devoted themselves to create a food strategy or a food plan for their states. And we hope to bring them all together behind a very important document called a New England Food Vision. New England wants to get to 50% self-sufficiency by the year 2060. And all of the state strategy plans feed into this. And I'll explain a bit about this. Unfortunately, I have very few copies. They've been selling like hotcakes. We actually give them away. And if you're interested in this, you can get to the webpage of Food Solutions New England at the University of New Hampshire. And if you hit Food Solutions New England at the University of New Hampshire, the study will be there and you can download it. But we're thrilled by this. It's already having an impact. And again, each state is doing it. This page comes from probably the most important of the New England state strategies. And that's Vermont's strategy of farm to plate. I head up the Maine food strategy. I've just retired from it, as I have from the university. And we've been working on how to do this in Maine. And we've had literally hundreds of consultations. And in the context of Maine, we're not only talking about food from the land, but also food from the sea. And the point I'd like to make, one of the points I'd like to make, is that in almost every single discussion of sustainable food, we focus only here, only on the first, if you will, box, which is the production of food from the land and food from the sea. But if we in New England, and you in Prince Edward Island, are to develop a real comprehensive food system, you've got to also talk about production and harvesting, processing, which you do very little of, and we do extraordinarily little of, distribution and wholesale, distribution and retail, and then consumer demand, and finally nutrient or ecosystem management. I want to get to that because the amount of food you and I waste every single day is unbelievable. And when I talk about distribution, I'm also going to be talking about the alternative food system, which will get into the actual nature of hunger in this province and in my own state of Maine. I'd like to make a couple of general comments and then move to some more specific things. Agriculture has changed dramatically, of course, as we all know, since World War II. Food and fiber production and productivity have soared, due in very, very large part to new technologies, mechanization, increased chemical use, specialization, and government policies that have tended to favor the maximization of production all through the United States and indeed in Canada. I went with Peter Bucher today. My wife and I had a great tour of part of the province. I was absolutely stunned at the lack of hedgerows and what that implies for habitat, for soil, so forth and so on. When Ronald Reagan became president, he appointed Wilbur Butts, who was the Dean of Agriculture at Purdue, as his head of the department, USDA, Department of Agriculture. And he literally told every farmer in the United States, pull up your hedgerows, and I want you to farm from one end of your property to the other. And they did. And we had some of the highest rates of soil loss, tons per acre in Iowa and other places in the Midwest. We were then living in Kansas. It didn't affect Kansas all that much, but in the Corn Belt, it was really very, very serious. And whenever those winds came, and they came, you were blinded by the amount of soil. But it wasn't soil, it was productivity. It was fertility that we were losing. We were losing fertility. And I can imagine when some of the breezes come across Prince Edward Island, you could get some pretty red clouds every once in a while. But that was part of the process. These changes have allowed fewer farmers with reduced labor demands to produce the majority of food and fiber in both Canada and the United States. Although these changes have many positive effects and reduced risks to farming, there also have been significant costs. Among the most important have been the loss of topsoil, groundwater contamination, surface water pollution, and similar things. Sustainable agriculture rests upon the key principle that we must seek to meet our present and current needs without compromising the ability of future generation to meet their own needs. Thus, stewardship is a key concept of sustainable agriculture, both in terms of natural and human resources. And this is of prime significance. Stewardship includes consideration of social responsibilities to working and living conditions of farmers and farm workers, the needs of rural communities, and consumer health and safety in the present and in the future. Stewardship of land and other natural resources involves maintaining or enhancing these vital resources for the long term. To do all of this, it really is essential to think about sustainability within a systems perspective. The system must be thought about in its broadest possible sense, from the individual farm to the local ecosystem and to the communities affected by the farming system, both locally and globally. Further, making a transition to sustainable agriculture is a process for farmers. The transition to sustainability normally requires a series of small, realistic steps. Family economies and personal goals influence how rapidly and how far farmers can go in this transition. Each small step can make a difference to advancing the entire system. The key to moving forward is the will to take the next step. But this is not a process for farmers alone. All participants, laborers, policy makers, processors, retail, and wholesale producers alike must participate in the process. Each has a very vital role to play. I want to turn now to a very quick consideration of specific concerns for sustainable agriculture beyond what we think of in terms of sustainable agriculture. One, of course, is water. When the production of food and fiber degrades the natural resource base, the ability of future generations to flourish really declines. Water, along with soil, is the principal resource that has allowed agriculture and society to prosper. Both water supply and quality must be central concerns. I note that PEI's water policy is currently in flux, but a first step has recently been taken in regard to both bottled water and also the ministerial order on groundwater. We face the same issue. We are the largest bottled water producer in the United States in Maine. It's a Nestle, which is a Swiss-owned firm, and it's Poland spring water, and its brand is what it means to be from Maine. And you know, on the label it has a moose, and it has a pine tree, and supposedly it's the essence of what it means to be from Maine. We've recently had a terrific drought, as you have, and they were influenced to stop bottling or withdrawing from groundwater. But our groundwater law really is all about the maximum withdrawal that an individual owner wants. We have literally no legal regime in the state of Maine nor throughout the riparian states east of the Mississippi to really limit groundwater withdrawals. But this is getting to be a very, very big issue because we recognize, in Maine at least, that water is our trump card. And we see places that are great agricultural centers that are running out of water. Our son is an attorney in California in a real estate law and water firm. They write the book on this in California. And the second largest home builder, Shea Homes, just had him get rid of or sell off 60,000 acres that they were holding in the Central Valley of California. Why? There's no water in the market. And these were all going to be homes and all going to be shopping malls, and it would look as bad as University Avenue looks, and it would be the typical California calification, if you will, of the landscape. And they have basically said, we're not going to build homes because there's no water. And think of it, California is the preeminent agricultural center for the United States. And it is running out of water. You can no longer put in great lawns. You've got to use locally appropriate vegetation, and people are getting rid of their lawns and getting rid of some of the trees that require a great amount of water. My son took me around he lives in an area of almond farms, and I was shocked to find out that each almond nut requires 6 gallons of water to produce that one nut. It's a stunning amount of water use that will never be returned again. Both water supply and quality must be central concerns. Wildlife, destruction of riparian habitats within watersheds reduces wildlife through erosion and sedimentation. The effects of pesticides, for example, remove riparian plant life and even water diversion issues. I've been sort of amazed as I've come to the island from time to time to see the destruction of riparian environments due to runoff from many of the farms. There's, of course, energy, air, other soil issues. Sustainable production practices involve a variety of approaches. Specific strategies must take into account topography, soil characteristics, climate, pests, local availability of inputs, and the individual grower's goals. Despite the site-specific and individual nature of sustainable agriculture, several general principles can be applied to help growers select appropriate management practices. 1, selection of species and varieties that are well suited to the site and to the conditions of each farm. 2, diversification of crops, including livestock, and cultural practices that actually enhance diversification. 3, management of the soil to enhance and protect soil quality. 4, efficient and humane use of inputs. And 5, consideration of farmers' goals and lifestyles. And, at least in the case of the United States, and I would suggest in Canada as well, an end to federal or national cheap food policies. Cheap food policies have been one of the biggest deterrents to developing a truly sustainable agricultural system where the costs are real and consumers will understand what they're really buying. Most of them right now are largely hidden. Because of time constraints and other things, I'd like to get to a couple of specific concerns related to parts of the food system. And the first one I want to talk about is distribution and retail. And you know, you all go to Sobeys, you all go to other markets, Loblaws, Atlantic, so forth and so on. We do as well. Though I should tell you that our very, very best estimates are 50 cents of every food dollar you spend in Canada is out of the house. So you're also spending a significant amount of money in restaurants, fast food places, any place other than the house. And when you larder the house, that's when we usually go to supermarkets and other retail facilities. One of the more interesting things that we've seen is the growth and development of farmers markets. And I know they're growing here as well. But they hit a low tide around 1967 in the United States. The federal government was able to count only 110 working farmers markets. Today, we have 52 in Maine alone. Likewise, we've seen a real growth in CSAs of community-supported agriculture, where people literally buy shares in farms. The farmer gets money up front and is able to use that for his or her operation. And we've done a number of studies. I've been involved in a number of studies now on the dynamics of CSAs. And one of the more interesting things is to see the social dimension of CSAs. People like to know where their food is coming from. People want to know how the animals on the farm are treated. Are they treated in a humane way? We've had scandal after scandal in the poultry industry. The rise of salmonella all over the place, all due to confined chicken facilities. All through Maine, we've seen we were a big poultry state. We still are the capital for ground eggs in the United States. Why, I'm not quite sure. We like ground eggs, but we like ground eggs. And most of those places are now derelict. And instead, the chicken poultry industry has moved to the Delmarva Peninsula. And these places house, we call them chicken Hiltons. They house thousands of birds. And they're confined. They're genetically now engineered so they have what American consumers want, which is really big breasts and white meat. And the animals literally cannot stand up. And they're placed in boxes so that they literally cannot move. And people want to see how their chickens are raised. Concurrently, we're seeing the rise of more and more free-range chickens, free-range hogs, free-range cattle. And again, people participate in CSAs in part because of the social aspects. They want to know where their food is coming from. And this, of course, has a great deal to do with the local food market, or the local food movement, which has really blossomed. The state of Maine, for example, has the largest organic farmers and gardeners institution in the United States. 6,700 members of MAFGA, the Maine Organic Farmers and Gardeners Association. And the number of organic farms has really grown significantly. We also have not only CSAs, but fishery CSAs, or the equivalent FSAs, where we want to know where our fish are coming from, where our lobsters are coming from, how are they handled, How are they raised if they're raised in artificial ponds and places like that? And so this is pretty significant. But I wanted to get to what I think is a very significant issue, and that is in the distribution aspect of not going to Loblaws, but all of those people who get their food somewhere else, what I call the alternative food system. And this really has to do with hunger and food insecurity in Prince Edward Island and elsewhere. In Canada, 32% of the people require some assistance in terms of food insecurity. And 25% of all users use food banks and other facilities throughout the country. Of all of the provinces in the south of Canada, if you will, PEI is certainly the worst in terms of accessing healthy foods. And while it has gone down in recent years, it has done so only slightly. It's 24.1%, by the way, in Maine. That means, that's 24.1% of all children under 16 years of age live in a food insecure home. Now forget the humane issue or the humanity issue. Think about that. Like Prince Edward Island, we are pretty close to no growth. We have more deaths than we have births, and the only growth in our population has come about through immigrants coming in. Not many people realize this, but between Portland and Lewiston, Auburn, the Twin Cities on the Androscoggin County, we are the 7th largest refugee resettlement center in the United States. Somalis, Sudanese, people from the former Yugoslavia. The latest crisis in the street, including Syria, is on our streets. And they account for almost all of the growth in Maine's population. Prince Edward Island is much the same way. Now, you look at 24.1% of all of the kids living in food insecure homes, and if you're a kid and you're hungry, you're not a learner. You're not going to do well in school. Your stomach is growling, and all of the chaos that happens in the household around the lack of food and who's to blame and this and that. That means 1/4 of your future workforce is not going to be educated for the jobs of the future and to contribute to the economy. So even if you don't care about these kids as human beings or these families, you ought to care about your own secure future when you reach retirement age. Who's going to pay the bill? And the point is, when you have 24.1%, as we have in Maine, it is absolutely stunning, and we can't pay enough attention to this. Let me just, this is a stunning map. When you see deep red, this is for New England. When you see deep red, you see areas of the greatest levels of poverty in New England and the greatest levels of food insecurity. And if you'd like to see this in a chart that goes with it, I can provide that at some other time. This is the state of Maine. That is, folks, our demographic future. And that has something significant to do that we do not know how to feed people effectively and efficiently with good, healthy food. Coincidentally, a lot of these areas, I don't know if you know or familiar with the concept of a food desert. The USDA defines a food desert. If you live in a city and you have to walk more than a mile to get fresh fruit and vegetables, if you have to walk more than a mile in a city, you live in a food desert. In a rural area, if you have to travel more than 10 miles, you live in a food desert. And these are mappable, and we have mapped them. Diego Rose at Tulane's Tropical Health Public Health School has also taken this data, and he's created the concept of food swamps. He's looked at New Orleans, and in New Orleans he's mapped the food deserts, and then he's mapped where the fast food joints are. And behold, those are food swamps, he calls them. That the only source of food in the food deserts are Chick-fil-A's, are McDonald's, are fast food joints. And that has a lot to do with childhood obesity, the rise of diabetes, which is going crazy. I am a diabetic. I know what that means. It's just really a significant health issue for the future of the United States, and I suspect for your future as well. Here in Canada, it manifests itself in many Aboriginal communities with the rise of diabetes, in part due to eating habits. So food insecurity is something, and we all try to ameliorate the problem with food banks, with community gardens, doing really good, important stuff, but we don't attack the issue up front, because fundamentally it is an issue of income. And neither country has really talked about an income safety net as they might have in Scandinavia and Finland. The second thing I'd like to talk about, which I think is also a horrendous issue, is food waste. Canadians waste $31 billion a year, every year, and 47% of that food waste is in the home. In other words, we put so much on our plates at home and we don't eat it and we waste it, or it lingers for a while in our refrigerators until we get the guts to clean the refrigerator out. Who knows what life forms have been created in there. Food waste occurs mostly at the retail level. And I think a lot of this, again, is our behavior. It's the lack of education. I don't know any way to do this, but as a kid, I couldn't wait to find an older kid's copies of Playboy. And I used to believe that that's what women were supposed to look like. And of course, we know they don't, and they shouldn't. We do the same thing with food. We Playboy our food. We choose our food largely based upon cosmetics. What we are told a tomato is supposed to look like, what a carrot looks like, what a potato looks like. Remember just a few years about the scare about the potato wart? The fruit was still good, but it looked yucky, as my son would say. And because it looked yucky, you don't buy it. That's at the consumer level. That's what you and I do when we do go to Loblaws. It's what you and I do when we go to the farmer's market. It's what you and I do. We choose to reinforce the notion of food cosmetics. And a lot of that food goes to waste. It's estimated that when the food gets into the supermarket, 10% of it from the supermarket alone will be rejected because that green pepper isn't green enough. And you all know what I mean. We like green peppers to look a certain green. It has a little black and a little purple in the green, so that it really has a very, very distinctive look. I am reminded, of course, that the real color of carrots, when they were first developed in Afghanistan, was purple, and only became carrot orange when it went to Holland, and the scientists of Wageningen, the great Dutch agricultural university, wanted to celebrate the house of orange, and so all carrots became orange. And if I present to a kid a purple carrot, an original, real live Afghani carrot, where they first came from in the world, the kid's about to reject it. And God forbid if you don't have the right color and the great physics that create that perfect apple. And if it has a wormhole in it or a blemish. And we've designed our production system and our transportation system. And by the way, transportation, how it gets to PEI is very important. It's the same thing in Maine. In 1979, there was an independent truckers strike in all of the United States. Everyone learned in 1979 in Maine what there was on the shelves was all there was. No region in the United States is more dependent upon imported food than New England. And much of your food is imported as well into the province. And this creates, I think, a real susceptibility to disruptions in the transportation system. We rely on trucks, and if we don't attack the problem of transportation and make transportation more sustainable, how the heck can we talk about sustainable agriculture? If we don't reduce our food waste, how do we talk about nutrient loading? And then what do you do with your wastes? Most of the food waste in the United States, certainly in Maine, goes into landfills. Food is the major component of landfill, the stuff in landfills in the United States. Not other products. It's overwhelmingly food, and this is in a country where we're one of the largest food producers, and it's the same thing here in Canada. Across North America, over 30% of all fruits and vegetables are rejected by supermarkets. I had an opportunity during working on the food strategy for Maine to visit a food processor. The food processor wouldn't tell me who it processes food for, but I later found out it was the Jolly Green Giant. And there he was, spectacular specimen. And the Jolly Green Giant in Saco, Maine, brings all of the food in, with the exception of potatoes, from outside on truck. And I learned with string beans, which I like very much, that there's a thing called the French cut. And the French cut on the string bean does this. But the machine sometimes does this. This is not a good string bean. It won't cut it for the Jolly Green Giant. It's got to be on the bias like this. So I asked, what do you do with a string bean that does this, but doesn't do this? They throw it away. It's an enormous amount of string beans. If corn doesn't look the way it really should when it goes into the Jolly Green Giant's vegetable medley, which is, in plastic, and you put it in the boiling water, if it doesn't look that yellow, it goes into the waste system. Usually piggeries or just thrown away into landfills. An enormous amount of food is wasted. And again, 30% of all fruits and vegetables are rejected by supermarkets. That's Loblaws, Sobeys, others as well, for the same very, very reason. Finally, let me talk about another sector in the food strategy, and that's processing.